I've got a verse that's sort of in my heart, and I'm going to link everything to it this morning. It's the words of Jesus, and they're found in John chapter 13 and verse 7. It's around about the time when Jesus was about to head for the cross, and there's a lot of things going on that his disciples couldn't get their heads around and couldn't fully understand, and they couldn't see the full picture. Have you ever been in a situation where there's some things you just don't quite understand at the moment, and you can't quite see the bigger picture, but you think there may be a bigger picture going on, but you can't quite see it yet? Ever been there? Yeah? And you need to know what's going on, and sometimes we don't fully know what's going on, but one day things will become a little bit clearer. And that's the whole thing about being a Christian, isn't it? We live by faith and not by sight. We can't see it, we can't work it out, we can't make sense of some of the things in our life, but there will come a time when we look back and we'll begin to see God's hand and say, right, now I can see what you were doing, and I couldn't see it at the time, and I began to lose hope at the time. I began to get disheartened at the time. This is where the disciples were at, because Jesus says, one of you in this room is going to betray me. I'm heading for the cross. I'm out of here. My mission on... What? What's going on? You can't do that. You're our Lord. We're following you. You can't leave us now. What's going on? What will happen then? Says the disciples. Come on, what's going on now? You can't leave us in the dark here. What's going on? So Jesus says these words to Peter, actually, as he was teaching him about the importance of washing one another's feet and talking about his betrayal and what was to come as he was heading to the cross. Jesus says these words, "You don't understand now what I am doing, but someday you will." Now that is really exciting news. Jesus says to the disciples, you don't understand now what I'm doing, but someday you will. Phew! Ladies and gents, young people this morning, you may not fully understand what God is doing right now in your life, in your church, in your family, in your circumstances, in your employment, in your bank balance, but one day you will. And that's really good news for all of us, because he's watching over all of us. And Jesus says, you don't know what I'm doing now, but one day you will. And one day things will become clear. And reference has been made to the fact that I've only got one hand. Yeah, that's the truth. I don't normally wear a sleeveless dress, but I was feeling a bit warm today. But I'm not embarrassed about having one arm, because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I wasn't hidden from God when I was knit together in my mother's womb. And one hand has taken me places that two hands maybe wouldn't have taken me. That's the truth. So when I say to a child, no, a shark didn't bit it off, I didn't fall through a pane of glass. Sometimes I used to make up all kinds of fancy stories because I could use a bit of drama and it could be quite exciting. There's nothing very exciting. The truth is, this one forgot to grow and this one remembered to grow. But what if God is taking hold of all of that now, the things that we can't fully understand, and he is going to do something beautiful, not just despite of it, not like as an afterthought, but what if in his sovereign plan he's already at work in the ways that we can't fully understand? Because if we understood everything, we'd be God. And we're not. And so often on reflection, we see God at work. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And God works behind the scenes and he brings things to light, but we don't always see it at the time. There's a lovely book in the New Testament called Philippians. And Paul often when he wrote Philippians, apparently he wrote it from Rome, and he was under house arrest in Rome. And he writes the book of Philippians later in life, and he's reflecting back. I think when you get a little bit older, you do reflect back, don't you? And you can trace things in your life and see how the path has been, the good times, the not so good times, and you see how things have woven together. And we often do that, don't we? In my work, I work as a hospital chaplain. We do something that's called reflective practice. After we've had a big trauma or a major incident, any of you that work for the NHS, you might do it in your teams as well. We do a reflective practice. We look back and see what have we learned about that, how could we improve what we do, what were the good things, what were the outcomes, how can we pull together, was there any problems, anything we need to iron out. So we do reflective practice where we look back so that we can then look forward. So we look at the problem and take hold of that problem and make it into a platform for something even better. Take hold of everything. And Paul looks back and reflects back in his life, and he writes some verses there in the first chapter of Philippians, Philippians 1 verse 12. I want you to know, dear ones, what has happened to me has not hindered but helped my ministry of preaching the gospel, causing it to expand and spread to many people. Because we could look at Paul and think, oh, poor chap. He got stoned, he got beaten, and then he got shipwrecked. Oh, it's like he had bad luck, isn't it? It's like, poor old bloke. And he doesn't talk about him having a family. He must have, one problem after another. Poor chap, what was all that about? What was going on? He went from one situation to another. But he looks back and he says, do you know what? All the things that happened to me that felt like they may have hindered me actually went to push further forward the gospel in so many other places, because persecution will always take the gospel further than if it's all contained. If you break a jar of perfume, it'll always spread rather than stay in the bottle, won't it? And so shipwreck lands him on an island, lands him on a piece of ground he hadn't fully intended to go to, but God used the shipwreck to take him to a place that he wasn't going to go to if that hadn't happened. What if our problems take us to a place that we never thought we were going to end up in? Because that's what God is able to do. But in the middle of the shipwreck, nothing makes sense. Where's God then? Where's God in my shipwrecks? Where's God in my challenges? Where's God when people are throwing stones and boulders at me? Where's God then? But God is working all things out for our good and his glory, if we trust in him. And we can't see now, as Jesus says to the disciples, what I'm doing now you can't fully see, but one day things will become an awful lot clearer. Think of, he's writing this book of Philippians, he may have been recalling back to an incident where he was in Philippi, the people that he's writing to, in the city of Philippi. He may have been, as he's reflecting back, I went to Philippi once, where you are, and I remember actually, there was that young girl, and she was fortune telling, and she came to Christ and had a huge transformation. Oh, the hassle we got for that. For doing something good, we landed ourselves in a right pickle. We were arrested. It goes to say in Acts chapter 16 and verse 16, we were forcefully seized. Oh, nice. Come on, we were only trying to do good. We were dragged off. We were accused, it says in verse 20. We were told that we were troublemakers. It brought great confusion. People were coming against us. We were stripped and we were beaten, and then we were put in prison, but not just in a nice little prison, in the deep, dark prison, and they were locked away. And it's all because they were doing something good. So he's writing this to the book for the people in Philippians. He's recalling back the things that happened to me have only brought about the furthering of the gospel. Because although he was locked in the prison cell in Acts chapter 16, him and Silas began to praise and thank God that even in the prison that God was there, as we've heard this morning. There's no problem too big where God isn't there. There's no place too dark where God isn't there, because he's there. In the deepest, darkest places where you think he's not there, he's there. And he's working things out. We're just going to hang on in there, because any minute now daylight is coming and you'll be out of that problem, and you'll be reflecting back like Paul is, saying, there was a time, do you know what, I was in a deep dark hole, and I didn't only just come out, by the skin of my teeth we got out of there. No, the jailer and all his family came to Christ. There's a massive impact in that city that shook the officials, shook the town councils, shook everywhere. That God set them free from the prison, and lives were completely transformed. But it took Paul's deep, dark problem to bring about that glorious outcome. And what if your deep, dark problem brings out a glorious outcome? It might be worth it. It will be worth it if you trust and believe that God's on your case. It says that in verse 24, that they were undaunted by the happenings. Paul and Silas were undaunted. Hang on in there, guys, because maybe God's going to do something amazing in all of this. They were undaunted, and the miracle came. So Paul reflects back, and he says, do you know what? All the things that have happened, I trace God's hand. The good, the bad, and the ugly, the things that have come against me, the mean people, the things that's been said and done, the accusations, the stones, the rocks, the shipwrecks, all my health problems, all of those things, God is working together something beautiful for my good and for his glory. Peter says these words, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, although as though something strange happened to you. See, trials are not strange, but they're very weird and very difficult when you're going through them. But he goes on to say, but rejoice that you are partaking in the sufferings of Christ, so that his glory can be revealed in you. So if it was like this for Jesus, where he predicts his death and his trials and his betrayals, he paints a pretty bleak picture to his disciples, and he says, what I'm doing now, you're not going to understand, but someday you will. He's predicting his death and the problems and the trials and the Garden of Gethsemane and the heartache and the sweat and drops of blood as we've celebrated this morning. But he's also saying, but a day is coming when there's going to be resurrection. There's a day coming when God's going to make everything new and beautiful again. So there's always a day of hope when we trust in God. There always is. Either he'll give you a way out of your problem, or he'll take you through your problems the other side and bring you through with great rejoicing and put his glory in you and bring some light in it. Because he's always working for the greater good. And there's always a bigger picture. We can't see the bigger picture, but God can. There's a story in the Old Testament, one of my favorites. I love the story of Joseph in the Old Testament. I always have. Because I'm like, yeah, been there, done it, got the T-shirt. All the ups and downs that he went through, yeah? All the very strange people that came into his life that gave him a lot of hassle. Yeah? Wouldn't your life be straightforward if it wasn't for strange and awkward and difficult people? So he was betrayed by even his brothers and thrown into a pit. But it was that pit that eventually took him to the palace. So don't worry about the pit, because the pit may take you to the palace. It's just when you're in the pit, all you can see is the pit. You can't see the palace. Whoever would have thought you'd end up in a palace? You couldn't see that one coming, could you? His brothers couldn't see that one coming. If only his brothers knew that betrayal was actually setting up Joseph for something far greater and far better, they wouldn't have taken that risk of putting him in a pit. Because they were far too jealous for him to be successful. They wouldn't have put him in the pit, what seemed like a nasty, cruel thing. If they knew that the outcome was good, they wouldn't have risked it. Because I don't want you to succeed. You've got an issue with you. If they'd have known the bigger picture, but thank the Lord, he knows the bigger picture and other people don't. And it's so beautiful. And so Joseph gets to the end of his life and he reflects back and he says these words in Genesis chapter 50, I think it is. He says these words. Do you know what? When his brothers came back and he showed himself to his brothers and he closed the doors, not to expose all of the bad things that they had done, but he closed the doors to give some privacy and to say, not to expose all that had been done, because he had forgiven them. It's really hard to forgive those who betray you, isn't it? It really is. It's a tough one. But he didn't expose it, but what he did was he exposed his heart, a heart that had forgiven. Say, I hold no ill against you. The problem actually lays in your lap and not in mine. I've overcome it. I've moved on from there. I've gone from the pit to the palace to here to there. And I've been on a journey with God. And God's favor has been with me if you read the scriptures. And God was with Joseph. Turn the page. And God was with Joseph. Turn the page. And God was with Joseph. Turn the page. And God's favor was with Joseph. Turn the page. And God was with Joseph. You read it. He says to his brothers, actually, do you know, this is the outcome of all of this. The things that seemed like they were going to harm me actually turned out for my good. However, sometimes with the Bible, we take a verse and we just read a bit of it because that's the bit that we like and that's the bit that is appropriate, and then we don't read the rest of the bit, okay? But the rest of the bit of that verse is so powerful because it says this, the things that seemed that they were going to harm me turned out for my good. That's right. And it goes on to say then, and for the saving of many souls. My problem, my pit, turned out not just for good, because then I went on to be Prime Minister, living in a palace, and everything turned out all right for me, but it turned out for the saving of many souls, because he fed so many people in that famine. His life had a massive impact, but it started in that problem where you was betrayed and misunderstood and badly treated and hurt and damaged and broken. And out of that, God did something beautiful, not just in his own personal life, but it had a huge impact on so many other people. What if God is willing to still do things like that in you and me? Because he is. What if he can take hold of our disabilities, our funny little ways, all the things, all the problems and the challenges that we have? What if he's able to take hold of that and say, there's a bigger picture going on here? What I'm doing now you can't make much sense of, but there will come a day when you will see me working all things out for your good and for my glory. The things that you thought were going to harm you, the things that you thought were going to be the ruin of you, the end of you, being in a pit, you think, right, any minute now a wild animal will maul me and I'll be really gone. Because we get in that pit thinking, don't we? We can't help it. We're in that weird think it's just going to go from bad to worse. I can feel it. But what if it's going to go from glory to glory? And you can feel it. What about if God's hand is all over it? Just got to be a little bit patient, a little bit looking towards him, not looking into the pit, just keeping your eyes up, keeping your eyes looking at him. What if all the things in your life are working for a greater good? What if the challenges are going to bring great change? What if the problems are going to set a platform for God to work? What if? What you're experiencing now, Jesus says, you can't make much sense of. He says to the disciples, because we're all the same, we want answers, we want to know. Do you like to know what's going on? Just tell me, Lord, what on earth's going on? No, you're not going to know fully now, but a time will come when things are going to be clear. So thank God for that time that will come when all things will be made clear, all things will be made good, all things will be made right. Because it's for his glory. We are living for his glory. We sing it and we really mean it. We live it. He's working for our good and for his glory. Amen.